I'm a very latecomer to Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera, because I first watched the movie in 2004 when I was a student, read the book a couple of years after that, and I didn't see the musical until 2013, the Royal Albert Hall 25th Anniversary Edition, incidentally. But once I'd seen it, I was compelled to make a video about it, in which I sang about it, as was the style at the time. Ah, bless. I look so young and well-rested. I mean, partially because it's 12 years ago, but also partially because we're in crisp 480p. You're welcome for this hurtle down memory lane. But the 2004 movie contains something that the stage play does not, which is a sword fight in the graveyard between the Phantom and Raoul. And people have been asking me for this for a while now, and eventually I have managed to get round to it, so well done me. If we haven't met before, I'm Jill Bearup, and I enjoy pretending to fight people for fictional purposes, so you'd think a Phantom of the Opera sword fight would be right up my alley. Well, you know what, let's do a plot goeth thusly to get us to the point where the sword fight happens, and then we'll get into it. Because as it turns out, I have some thoughts. Phantom of the Opera is the story of the shenanigans that happen at the Opéra Populaire in Paris. Our main players are ingenue Christine Daae, daughter of a famous and dead violinist, who has been taught to sing by an angel of music she has never seen and doesn't know the name of. But that's okay, because she believes that the angel of music has been sent by her father from beyond the veil to guide her. Yes, well, it turns out that the angel of music, and this is kind of the twist when you read the book, is in fact the same person as the opera ghost, the mysterious phantom who lives under the opera house and bosses everyone around. And the Phantom of the Opera slash angel of music slash opera ghost really has the hots for Christine, and also seems to have such an unearthly beautiful voice that he can exert some kind of hypnotic control over her. But that's a little ambiguous. Because of this being violently in love with her thing, he does not want her, for example, to get together with Raoul de Chagny, even though Christine likes Raoul, and they knew each other when they were kids, and they seem to get on pretty well, and it would be quite nice not to be an orphan who is entirely dependent on the opera house to give you a roof over your head. Right? The Phantom wants Christine to replace Carlotta, the current principal soprano, and when the owners don't acquiesce to his requests, he straight up kills a guy. I mean, he does a bunch of other things too, but the murder, it really sticks out, I'm just saying. Sometime thereafter, in the film specifically, Christine sneaks out of her room past her sleeping secret fiancé in order to go and visit her father's grave. But the Phantom clobbers the coachman unconscious and takes her himself. After she has emoted about her dead dad for a while, he tries to hypnotize her again with his voice, but then Raoul comes riding in on a white charger. I mean, technically a grey horse, but who's counting? And Raoul and the Phantom have a sword fight. Now, I'm trying to be fair about this, but I must assume that what happens on the screen was in fact the intent of the filmmakers, in which case I must conclude that what they wanted to show us is that neither Raoul nor the Phantom are particularly good at sword fighting. Fights, like songs, are not just set pieces to use up runtime, they're supposed to either move the plot forward or tell us things about the characters. Spoiler, this does neither. For reference, this is Count Pierce Not de Face, as named by my subscribers, and he is our stage combat dummy. So when you hear me call out a number, that corresponds to a target area or the parry associated with that. So let's get into it. We start with the Phantom dropping off the roof and forcing Raoul to parry 3. Technically, except it actually looks more to me like he's helping the Phantom down. That's just a little bit unfortunate. They break apart, and the Phantom is either flourishing dramatically or he's got tangled up in his cloak. You be the judge. If Raoul were a more experienced swordsman, he'd probably have just stuck the Phantom then and there, but maybe he was surprised. That's fine. The Phantom thrusts for 2 and cuts for 4 and 4 again, and I don't know if it's odd sword work or a sort of continuity bobble, but something about this transition from one shot to another felt a bit off to me. But never mind, let's move on. The Phantom cuts for 1, thrusts for 2, and then overextends, so Raoul, very sensibly, shoves him in the back to continue his forward momentum away from Raoul. But again, he doesn't actually do anything to follow that up. That being said, there's not a big gap between the shoving and the next thing that happens, so it's not a huge problem. But again, the choreography does suggest that Raoul is not, you know, an expert at the sword fighting thing. And credit where it's due, the Phantom swirls his cloak dramatically into Raoul's face to distract him, and then what happens here? This is the first of a few occasions in this fight where something happens which doesn't quite logically follow. I'm not sure that the framing of the shot is really helping either. I understand that we're trying to make it look interesting and we're trying to give the audience a sense of the landscape here, but it's kind of weird that we seem to be looking at it from the bottom of the steps. Maybe it's to hide stunt performers, maybe it's meant to be from Christine's point of view, but either way, it looks a little bit awkward. And regardless, I ask again, what is this? The Phantom seems to think that since thrusting doesn't work, maybe he should just use his sword as a club, and he swings in this direction. No, that's too long. In this direction, as in from his right to his left. And when the sword comes in for him, Raoul obviously parries 4. And while the energy is going this way, what seems to happen is that Raoul parries and then spins in that same direction. He doesn't go with the hit. He spins in the opposite direction. Which is perfectly possible to do and make look fine, but he spins awkwardly, as if he's being carried along by the momentum of the hit, but he's going in the opposite direction. So it just looks wrong from a physics standpoint. Raoul then jumps down in a couple of jumps that could have been done by a stunt double from the back, and then you wouldn't have had to cut so many times. It just looks kind of awkward, guys. The Phantom leaps through the air with the greatest of ease, and that's fine because he has been the driver of the fight so far, but then there's this weird continuity bobble in the middle where we go from no buildings to buildings, no buildings to buildings. And then, almost immediately afterward, another cut when he hits the ground. So he also takes 3 cuts to go from the top to the bottom. I understand not wanting the Phantom to hop like a bunny from one place to the other. I suppose that would ruin the mystique, but choppy. And then, once the pair of them are on the ground, they simultaneously run in the same direction to fight around a monument. At which point Raoul parries 1, and then some bewilderment happens. But unfortunately, them landing on the ground and then immediately running to the other side of this monument is another occasion where it's just weird. There's no look of calculation or reaction on Raoul's face. He's just running, and the Phantom is running, and we don't really know why, and it doesn't quite look natural. If the Phantom had landed on the ground, and then they had both taken a moment to size each other up, and then one of them had started to run in the direction of the monument, that would have been fine, because even if the second person follows very shortly there afterwards, it looks like one person is doing something and you are reacting, as opposed to, we both just decided to go here. Regardless, incoherence. Raoul does a parry 1, which is a low left parry, and then his sword comes up. And I would expect at this point either a cut to 5, which is overhead, or a cut to 3, which is high and the opponent's right-hand side. We can see it swinging, and yet the next thing that happens is we cut to the Phantom advancing and attacking. It feels like we missed something out. And then, having had the Phantom run towards Raoul, even though Raoul is clearly mid-attack, we then swap sides? The Phantom has been attacking from the left, and now he's attacking from the right, and so the whole thing just becomes a bit incoherent. How can I put this? This does not help our understanding of continuity. I think Raoul parries 2, and then we swap perspectives again, and I don't know what this is. I mean, I think it's supposed to be a bind, which is when you catch someone's sword low, and then you bring both of those swords over the top. You are controlling your opponent's blade, that's the idea. But the Phantom's blade is not there. It's somewhere else. Why is he doing this? We don't know. It looks weird. Raoul is roaring in a manly fashion, but he's not making contact with the Phantom's sword or with the Phantom in general, so what is he doing? The Phantom thrusts for a very high 3 and is parried, and finally, Raoul uses his sword to attack and cuts to 3 and is parried in turn. This is the first unequivocal sword attack that Raoul does, and only really the second offensive move that we've seen him make. And how far are we into the fight? I initially assumed that this was the point in the fight at which the tide was going to turn a little bit, where we would go from just the Phantom attacking all the time to the Phantom attacking but also having to defend from Raoul. I was incorrect. Raoul parries 2 and then dodges behind some more scenery. The Phantom cuts for 5 and is parried. We're now very far away, and I'm not exactly sure what is happening. There's a tree in the way. Raoul is still retreating. There's a parry 3 from Raoul, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of effort there. A parry of 3 is supposed to protect this side of your body from things coming in from this side. His looks more like this, which that's maybe not going to do so much for you as you would wish. And then the Phantom punches Raoul's sword and Raoul falls down, I guess? At which point the Phantom cuts a tree. He is right there in front of you, my dude. That tree was not even slightly in the way. Raoul parries 2, runs away to make some space, and then turns back in the way that is more likely to get you stabbed, but never mind, to parry something, but we're cutting to Christine looking horrified at this point. The Phantom's blade gets trapped in a piece of ironmongery with bonus sparkles. We do a bit of struggle, bump. The Phantom cuts for Raoul's head again, and we get another parry 5. Is the Phantom meant to be supernaturally strong, too, so he can beat Raoul by using his sword like a club? More sparkles, and then it looks very much like these two chaps are trying to high-five each other with their swords. The Phantom swings again around the corner to Raoul's waiting blade, and then they stand on opposite sides of a monument. Tensely, I guess. The Phantom runs around, Raoul parries 3 and thrusts back. Good lad. But off-screen, so we can't see what's happening. And then Raoul attacks, but in the next shot it looks like he's defending? Who can even tell at this point? There follows another attack by the Phantom, and then half an attack by Raoul, which doesn't seem to join up with the next shot at all, which is just their swords in close-up. Big sweeping move by the Phantom, close-up of some feet, more swords, another dramatic cloak swirl which Raoul ducks, and then Raoul gets cut. This, however, does seem to galvanize him, and he goes on his first sustained offensive of the entire fight. He swings wildly at the Phantom, and then there are more sword close-ups. The Phantom has to parry 3, and then 2, and then we see Raoul's feet backing up in the next shot. That doesn't really follow with what's been going on so far. Oh wait, no, Raoul was retreating, but now he's standing still in a completely different stance, and he's parrying an attack to 3, which comes in with such force he's basically carried all the way over to his left, but then he parries and we're in the bind. Successfully this time. Raoul forces the Phantom's sword down, stamps it out of his hand, kicks it out of the way, is ready to deliver the killing blow, but then...
No, Raoul! No. Not like this.
Really though? I said in my original video on Phantom that I really liked that Christine ultimately defeats the Phantom with compassion. When he sees his behaviour from her perspective, he is so shamed by it that he's overcome with remorse and lets them both go at the end of the musical. So I get, for both plot reasons and character reasons, that you might not want to just murder him outright, but what are you going to do with him? The answer the movie comes up with, which is just leave him there, obviously is extremely stupid, but I think my solution would have been get Christine to go back to the horse-drawn thingy that brought her here and get some rope or some pieces of harness or something that they can tie him up with, and then they can put him in the horse-drawn whatever and take him back, and Christine could ride Raoul's horse, and I'm just saying, there are things that could be done here. And those things can be done even though you are at a cemetery which is some distance out from the city and you've had to go through a bunch of muddy woodland to get here. But because the movie wanted a dramatic sword fight and didn't think through the logical consequences of what making Raoul win it would be, we get...
Now, let it be war upon you both.
Sure, dude, whatever. So the lovebirds go off, and Raoul decides that how they're going to lure the Phantom out, because obviously they didn't take the opportunity to have him arrested when he had him at sword point, is to pretend to acquiesce to his requests and then have him arrested. And then a bunch more stuff happens, which is not really relevant to this particular sword fight, but then nothing's really relevant to this sword fight because it is, pun fully intended, pointless. I could forgive the weird shot choices and the fast pace of the editing. It was very much the style at the time. The weird continuity mistakes bother me, kind of instinctually, but I mean, most people aren't going to notice them, but it just doesn't have a point. There is no purpose. There is no emotional weight here. It tells us nothing about the characters except that Raoul is willing to not kill someone on Christine's say-so, even though that guy is a known murderer. And overall, it's just kind of there. In the musical, there is a similar graveyard scene, but it runs a bit more like this, and it contains no sword fighting, at least not in the Albert Hall version. I just don't understand why the filmmakers made this choice. If they felt they had to have a sword fight, that's totally fine, but why couldn't you end it with the Phantom disappearing due to his own clever trickery, as we have seen previously demonstrated? Obviously at this point you can't kill either of the male leads, but basically anything that isn't that would have been better than and then we just let him go. Right? I don't know. And even if there were a point to this sword fight, it's still not a good one. There is a review of the Phantom of the Opera movie by a channel called Musical Hell, I'll link it in the description, and she doesn't have any stage combat experience as far as I know, but she refers to the sword fight as clumsy and badly filmed. And I cannot disagree. The angles chosen are weird, a fair number of the moves don't make sense from just a logical or geometrical standpoint, and even if we accept that sometimes people do non-intuitive things, the continuity is so spotty that it just feels uncomfortable to watch. If I had to guess, I would assume that they filmed a sword fight that was longer, and then they decided that they couldn't possibly have Raoul attacking the Phantom very much at all. When he does finally start attacking the Phantom, he wins in quite short order, which makes it look very strange. It feels like there was a longer fight here with more back and forth, and then they went, nah, we don't want to see Raoul being heroic. That's just silly. The movie as a whole leaned really hard into making the Phantom a brooding, sexy creature of sexy brooding darkness or whatever, but that does end up at some points making Raoul look just kinda silly. And again, I know, I'm repeating myself, but I really want to hammer this point home. The continuity is not good. When I watched this fight for the first time in absolutely ages, in preparation for this video, I was fully prepared to defend it as a reasonable piece of choreography, even though it's in a movie that people generally don't like. But even that first time through, it still felt jarring and uncomfortable to watch, and as soon as I started to break it down, I realized why. But hey, it gives us something to talk about, right? If you'd like a review of some better sword fights, may I recommend my video on the fights in The Princess Bride? Or possibly, if you're looking for like that early 2000s vibe, I have one on the blacksmith fight in Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. You might like that one. It is oceans apart from whatever this is, pun fully intended. Side note before you go, if you haven't bought my book yet, you can now buy the ebook on Patreon for a one-time fee of some number of dollars, which I'm going to put on the screen. And the important part is, you don't need a Patreon account to do that. So first, you get files which don't have any anti-piracy stuff on them. Second, you get to buy something from me without having to go through Amazon. And third, I get more of the money that you pay, as opposed to it going to Amazon or somebody else. So win-win-win is what I'm saying. Having had to re-record it for the 4th time, don't ask, we are now about a third of the way through the audiobook edit, but I'll let you know when I know. Regardless, hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.